The blood was everywhere, a crimson tide blossoming on polished marble, reflecting the flickering torchlight. My hand, slick with it, trembled around the ash dagger. Just moments ago, I'd plunged it into the chest of a high Fey youth. Now, another knelt, waiting. A female. And I knew, with a bone-deep certainty, that I would kill her too. This was the price. The monstrous, soul-shattering price of saving Prythian, of freeing Tamlin. I was a butcher. A monster. The lines between me and Amarantha, the queen who'd twisted me into this weapon, were blurring with every beat of my shattered heart. Then, the ultimate sacrifice. I reached for the second dagger, gripped the fine-boned shoulder of the waiting Fey, and looked into her eyes. My eyes. And plunged the blade into my own awaiting heart. This wasn't just a fantasy novel. This was a dark psychological thriller masquerading as a fairy tale, a story where the hero you fought to save becomes your deepest prison, and the monster you hated becomes your unlikely savior. What if the freedom you bled for wasn't freedom at all, but a gilded cage? What if the cost of victory was your very soul? Welcome to Quiet Books, where dark thrillers, shocking twists, and unforgettable endings are broken down one story at a time. This is the true story of what happened after the curse was broken, after the supposed happy ending. Because sometimes the real nightmare begins once the monster is dead.
3 months. 3 months had passed since Feyre Archeron returned from under the mountain, resurrected, remade, an immortal high Fey. But the victory was hollow, a gilded lie. Every night, the horrors replayed. Spiked ceilings, gnashing teeth, blood on her hands, the phantom scent of iron, the taste of bile. She jolted awake, gasping, her new Fey strength a cruel mockery as she vomited into the toilet, her hands clenching until her nails nearly pierced her skin. Physically healed, stronger than ever. Inside, she was a fractured mess, trapped in a gilded cage of trauma. She had saved Tamlin, saved his people, but at what cost to herself? And what was truly unsettling, what set the chilling tone of this dark thriller, was Tamlin's profound lack of reaction. He slept through her nightmares, never stirring, never comforting. When he woke from his own terrors, he transformed into his beast form, patrolling their bedroom like a guard dog, his growls a constant reminder of the primal fear now ruling their lives. Their unspoken agreement, a silent pact of denial, was to never acknowledge Amarantha's lingering torment. For Feyre, this silence only deepened the chasm, creating a suffocating pressure. She had risked everything, endured unimaginable pain, yet he seemed oblivious, or perhaps didn't want to notice her suffering. This wasn't love. It was a desperate, possessive need for control, a fragile illusion of protection that threatened to shatter her. And then there was the tattoo, a swirling black mark covering her left arm, an eye etched into her palm that seemed to watch her, a constant, chilling presence. This wasn't just a scar, it was a living reminder of her desperate bargain with Rhysand, the High Lord of the Night Court, the very male she was forced to hate. 1 week a month, with him. She hadn't heard from him since the mountain, but the tattoo was a ticking clock, a debt waiting to be called, a tether to a dangerous secret she couldn't share with Tamlin. It hinted at a connection deeper than enemy or ally, a bond that both terrified and intrigued her, a constant source of tension in her already fragile existence. What would Rhysand demand? And how would Tamlin react if he ever found out? Feyre yearned to do something, to help rebuild the nearby villages,
to hunt for the people struggling after Amarantha's reign. The spring court was opulent, restored to its former glory, but beyond its walls, suffering lingered. This was the Feyre she knew, the fiercely independent hunter who had provided for her family. But Tamlin refused, his face set. He claimed it wasn't safe, that he couldn't protect her. His possessiveness, initially comforting, was now suffocating. Lucian, Tamlin's emissary and Feyre's former friend, only shook his head in warning, a silent accomplice to her growing imprisonment. This wasn't protection. It was confinement. Feyre, once a fierce hunter, now found herself trapped within the opulent manor, forced into a role she despised, wearing pretty dresses while her soul screamed for purpose. The engagement ring on her finger, sparkling with a square-cut emerald, felt less like a promise and more like a heavy chain, tightening with every passing day. She was an ornament, a symbol of Tamlin's restored power, not a partner. The question was, how long could the woman who had killed to save Prythian endure being reduced to a beautiful, silent trophy? The answer, she was beginning to fear, was not much longer.
The wedding planning was relentless, orchestrated by Ianthe, a high priestess and Tamlin's childhood friend. Ianthe, with her elegant demeanor and constant praise, became another voice reinforcing Feyre's new, passive role. She saw Feyre as a symbol, a lady to be admired, not an active participant in the court's recovery. This was a subtle but insidious form of control, forcing Feyre into a mold that chipped away from her identity. When Ianthe casually offered gloves to cover Feyre's tattoo, it was a stark reminder that even this mark of her survival was something to be hidden, a secret to be kept from the world, and most importantly, from Tamlin. This was a crucial clue, a red flag about the spring court. It was built on secrets and appearances, not genuine healing or open communication. Their intimacy, once a source of comfort, now felt like a fragile escape, a desperate attempt to reconnect across the growing chasm. Tamlin found solace in her body, his lovemaking intense and possessive, a desperate attempt to reassert control, to reassure himself that she was still his. But even in these moments, a crucial, unsettling question arose. Feyre, seeking to understand her new status, her place in this powerful court, asked what her title would be. High Lady? She ventured, a flicker of hope for partnership, for an equal footing with the High Lord she had saved. Tamlin's response was a chilling revelation, a red herring in the guise of tradition. There is no such thing as a High Lady. High Lords only take wives, consorts. He silenced her questions with another passionate kiss, effectively shutting down any discussion of her future beyond being his passive wife. This wasn't just a tradition. It was a clear statement of control, a definitive denial of her power, agency, and equal standing. It meant she would have no voice, no authority, no role in the court's governance. She was to be a beautiful, silent fixture, and nothing more. This was not the partnership she had envisioned, not the freedom she had sacrificed everything for. The next day, Tamlin, perhaps sensing her despair, allowed Lucian to take Feyre to the village. But this wasn't an act of liberation. It was a calculated demonstration, a public display of his restored power, a showing off of his trophy. The villagers, still reeling from Amarantha's camps, a brutal network of tunnels where thousands of Fae were imprisoned and driven to madness, greeted Feyre with reverent fear. They called her Feyre Cursebreaker, a title of awe, but politely refused her help. The debt is paid, they repeated, making it clear her presence was a distraction, a painful reminder of their suffering. She was a ghost, not a savior, her heroism a burden to them. Lucian, witnessing Feyre's frustration, finally opened up. He revealed Tamlin's deep-seated fear of losing her again, explaining that his High Lord was terrified of any enemy using her against him.
Lucian, too, carried a similar trauma, having been forced to watch his own lover die, and he understood the crippling grip of fear. He pleaded with Feyre to understand, to give Tamlin time, to accept her role as a symbol of stability, a beacon of hope for a traumatized court. But he also revealed the brutal reality of the tithe, a biannual payment enforced by Tamlin, with severe consequences for those who couldn't pay. Feyre, as Tamlin's wife, would be expected to sit beside him, witnessing his judgments, his sacred hunting rights for those who failed to comply. This was the true face of the Spring Court, a beautiful facade masking a brutal, unforgiving reality where tradition trumped compassion. Tamlin's protection was not just for her, but for his own fragile ego and precarious power, a desperate attempt to maintain order through fear. Feyre was not a participant, not a partner, but a protected, revered prisoner. Her every action and desire constrained by Tamlin's fear and the rigid expectations of his court. The woman who had fought and killed to save Prythian was now reduced to a pretty symbol, silenced and confined. And the question lingered, a chilling whisper in the opulent halls. How long could she endure this gilded cage before the broken pieces of her soul shattered completely? The wedding was supposed to be a new beginning, a balm for the wounds Feyre carried from under the mountain. But as the days bled into the ceremony, a suffocating expectation settled over her. She was paraded through endless parties, a smiling trophy for Tamlin's court, while inside, the vastness of her unending immortal existence yawned, threatening to swallow her whole. Every forced smile, every empty conversation with Tamlin's friends was a reminder of the chasm growing between them. Tamlin, oblivious or unwilling to see her true torment, mistook her silence for shared dislike of the gatherings, while Feyre saw his genuine joy, a joy she could no longer access. She clung to Ianthe, the high priestess, for distraction, letting her lead conversations, a testament to how utterly lost Feyre felt in this gilded cage, how profoundly her spirit was dwindling. One evening, by the grand hall doors, 2 high Fae guards, Bronn and Hart, approached Ianthe, then turned their attention to Feyre. They spoke of her bravery and brilliance facing the Middengard worm, as if her near-death experience, her profound trauma, was a sporting event, a spectacle for their amusement. The casualness of their admiration was a chilling reminder that her suffering was just a legend to them, not a living nightmare. When Hart, almost innocently, asked if she'd heard from the High Lord of the Night Court, reasoned, Feyre's bland smile finally vanished. "Then you don't know reasoned very well at all," she retorted, a flicker of her old fire returning. It was the most assertive thing she'd said in weeks, a tiny crack in her carefully constructed facade of compliance, a clue that the old Feyre was still buried, fighting to get out, and that reasoned, despite everything, still held a strange, unsettling power over her. That night, the nightmares returned with a vengeance. The spiked ceiling of Amarantha's dungeon, the gnashing teeth of the worm, the fear of being impaled, it all crashed down on her. She woke gasping, clinging to the reality of her safe, luxurious room. Yet the terror was as real as the cool stone against her head. Soon, she would be married, and she desperately hoped this happy ending would finally make her fine, would finally mend the gaping wounds in her soul. But when she saw the wedding gown, a monstrous confection of tulle and chiffon, she knew it was another lie. It was everything she wasn't, a costume for the role Tamlin and Ianthe wanted her to play, a docile, beautiful, silent high lady. Alice, her handmaiden, seemed to share her unspoken thoughts, gently pushing her towards the ceremony with a morbid prediction. "You sound like you're going to your funeral." The words hung heavy in the air, a chilling prophecy of the death of her spirit. As Feyre walked down the aisle, 300 eyes bore into her, their faces blurring into the judging crowd from under the mountain. White rose petals mixed with red ones, like drops of blood, mirroring the Fey youth she'd killed, the blood on her hands, the sacrifices she'd made. Every step was too fast, propelling her towards Tamlin, towards Ianthe, towards a vow that would shackle her forever to her broken soul. The thing inside her, the trauma, the despair, began to roil, threatening to erupt. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move. She begged silently, pleaded for someone, anyone, to save her from this fate. Tamlin's concern was a distant echo, Ianthe's serene smile a torment. Just as she was about to shatter, just as the walls of her mind threatened to collapse, a thunderclap ripped through the garden. The world exploded into darkness, and through the swirling night, Rhysand appeared, straightening his black jacket, a devilish smile playing on his lips. "Hello, Feyre, darling," he purred, his voice a chilling prophecy, a dramatic entrance that changed everything, a direct answer to her desperate, silent plea. Tamlin roared, claws springing from his knuckles, but Rhysand merely raised a hand, freezing the Spring Court High Lord and his sentries in their tracks. Ianthe, the poised High Priestess, visibly recoiled, her face pale with fear. Rhysand surveyed the scene, then clicked his tongue at Feyre's silk gloves, a sly acknowledgement of the tattoo hidden beneath, a silent confirmation that he knew her secrets, her suffering. He had heard her. Through the bargain bond, he had felt her desperation, her silent scream to escape. "I'll be taking her now," he announced, calling in the bargain he'd made with her under the mountain. 1 week a month in the Night Court. Tamlin, enraged, demanded a price, but Rhysand, with a venomous smile, simply linked elbows with Feyre. The touch was abhorrent, yet Tamlin, shockingly, did not give chase. He threatened Rhysand, but let Feyre be pulled away, his claws receding into his hands, a terrifying passivity that Lucien, standing beside him, clearly registered as a betrayal. This was a crucial clue, a devastating revelation about Tamlin's love. It was possessive, but not truly protective. He chose to let her go rather than risk open war with Rhysand, revealing his deep-seated fear and lack of true power, his unwillingness to truly fight for her, or perhaps with her. Then, darkness roared around Feyre, a tearing wind, a sensation of being ripped through space and time. When it vanished, she was clinging to Rhysand, surrounded by a breathtaking panorama of snow-capped mountains and a sea of stars that glittered like scattered diamonds. "Welcome to the Night Court," he said. And for a moment, against all expectation, against all the dark legends, she felt a strange, unsettling beauty, a profound sense of awe. This wasn't the depraved dungeon she'd imagined, not the court of nightmares she'd been told to fear. It was Rhysand's private residence, a stunning eyrie, open to the elements, yet magically warm and inviting. He explained that his true court, the feared one, lay beneath the mountain, shrouded in darkness. But this was his home, a sanctuary forbidden to most. He casually tore off her gloves, revealing the tattoo, and confirmed what she'd suspected, what she'd hoped for. He had heard her silent screams. He had heard her. He revealed he could slip through her mental shields, especially when her emotions were strong, seeing her nightmares, her vomiting, her terror of certain rooms and colors. It was an invasion, a profound violation of her privacy, yet also a shocking demonstration of his profound understanding of her suffering, something Tamlin utterly lacked. Feyre, enraged and exposed, hurled her shoe at him. Her immortal strength sent it flying, striking him in the head. He was surprised, then intrigued, murmuring, "Interesting," as he dissolved the second shoe into dust. It was a moment of raw defiance, a hint of the power stirring within her. a power Rhysand was clearly trying to provoke and understand. A power he recognized, even if Tamlin did not. The next morning, Rhysand's two old handmaidens, Nuala and Ceridwen, once shadowy figures from under the mountain, now fully corporeal and kind, prepared her for breakfast. Rhysand awaited her at a glass table overlooking the starry expanse, a picture of domestic tranquility that completely defied his fearsome reputation. He was calm, almost domestic, but his purpose was clear. For this week, I want you to learn how to read, he stated, adding shielding as an afterthought. Feyre scoffed, her pride wounded, but Rhysand pressed, highlighting her inability to read as a dangerous weakness and her mental vulnerability as a liability in a world teeming with powerful Fae. He hinted at his own purposes, keeping his true motives shrouded in mystery, yet his words carried an undeniable weight of truth. Just as their tension escalated, a new figure arrived. Morrigan, Rhysand's stunning golden-haired cousin, her laughter echoing through the airy home. Mor, direct and unapologetically cheerful, embraced Feyre, then playfully threatened to nail Rhysand's balls to the wall, instantly endearing herself to Feyre, and hinting at a deeper, more complex dynamic within this court. This was no court of nightmares. This was a family, fiercely loyal and surprisingly open. Rhysand, subtly irked by Mor's interruption, insisted they continue the lesson. Feyre agreed, not out of compliance, but a cold, hard logic. Not being able to read had almost killed her, leaving her vulnerable and dependent. Letting Rhysand rifle through her mind was a vulnerability she refused to tolerate any longer. But as she sat across from him, a stack of books between them, her ingrained hatred for him warred with the undeniable necessity and wisdom of his offer. His quiet questions about her strength, about the combined powers of the High Lords that resurrected her, were not just idle curiosity. They were a seed of a new, unsettling possibility, a crucial clue to her true nature and the immense, untamed power she now held within her. The chilling truth about Feyre's new reality wasn't just the trauma she carried, but the dangerous secrets lurking just beneath the surface of Prythian. Secrets that Tamlin, in his blindness, refused to acknowledge. After her forced bargain, Feyre found herself whisked away to the Night Court, into a lavish but unsettling apartment, utterly alone. Her captor? Rhysand, the High Lord whose true motives were as shadowed as his name, a male she was supposed to despise, yet who offered her something Tamlin never could: agency. Rhysand, it turned out, wasn't just holding her captive. He was forcing her into lessons, pushing her to grow, to become powerful. First, reading and writing. Feyre, having spent her life hunting to survive, was mostly illiterate, a vulnerability Tamlin had never bothered to address, never seen as a problem. Rhys, with infuriating charm, would present her with sentences like, "You look absolutely delicious today, Feyre," a provocative gesture that highlighted his manipulative nature, yet also subtly chipped away at her ingrained sense of inadequacy, forcing her to engage. But his true, far more critical lesson was in mental shielding. He ruthlessly invaded her mind, showing her the terrifying ease with which a powerful Fae could shred or control her thoughts, could pluck secrets from her brain. He taught her to build impenetrable walls, not just as protection, but as a vital skill for her own survival, her own freedom. This wasn't about power games, it was about self-preservation, a stark contrast to the coddling she received in spring, a brutal but necessary awakening. The reason for these strange, intense lessons soon became horrifyingly clear, a twist that shattered Feyre's carefully constructed peace and revealed the true stakes of their world. Rhysand revealed a truth that shattered Feyre's carefully constructed peace. War was coming. Not a distant threat, but an inevitable, brutal conflict orchestrated by the King of Hybern, a ruthless monarch who had been planning for centuries. Amarantha's reign, he explained, was merely a 50-year test run, a demonstration of how easily Prythian could be conquered, how fragile their peace truly was. Hybern aimed to reclaim the mortal lands south of the Wall and would crush any Fey resistance in his path. The Spring Court, nestled close to the human lands, was a prime target, and Tamlin's blind complacency was a ticking time bomb, a betrayal of his own people.
Rhysand then dropped another bomb, one that explained the strange powers stirring within her, the reason for her resurrection. Feyre herself was a weapon. Her resurrection by the 7 High Lords had imbued her with a fragment of each of their powers, a dangerous, untamed magic. She was potentially a High Lady, capable of wielding immense, untamed magic. If she didn't learn to control it, she would be destroyed, and with her, a vital player in the coming war. He saw her not as a fragile human, not as a delicate trophy, but as a vital player in the coming war, a force to be reckoned with. "You are no one's subject," he snarled, challenging her to choose. Remain a pretty trophy, a pawn in Tamlin's gilded cage, or become a force to be reckoned with, a warrior in her own right. The choice was clear. Master her powers, or watch her human family and all of Prythian burn. When Rhysand finally returned Feyre to the Spring Court, the contrast was immediate and jarring. The air of the Night Court, though intense, felt invigorating, purposeful. The Spring Court, in contrast, felt suffocating, stagnant. Tamlin, consumed by a destructive rage, had trashed his study. His fury focused solely on Rhysand taking her, not on the violation of her mind or the terrifying revelations she carried. He scanned her for physical harm, oblivious to the mental intrusion or the terrifying revelations she carried. He dismissed the war warnings as Rhysand's lies, paranoid delusions designed to destabilize his court, and her potential powers as a dangerous vulnerability. "There will be no training," he declared. "I will guard you." This wasn't protection, it was control, a desperate attempt to keep her confined, safe, and utterly dependent, to keep her exactly where he wanted her, powerless. He refused to even consider the possibility of Hybern's war, or Feyre's role in it, demanding instead every detail she remembered about the Night Court's defenses, treating her like a spy, not a partner, his paranoia eclipsing any true concern for her. His fear had blinded him to the true threat, and to Feyre's evolving identity, her burgeoning power. He wanted a broken girl, not a High Lady. The suffocating nature of her life in Spring Court became painfully evident during the Tithe, a ceremonial collection of tributes from the various Fae under Tamlin's rule. Seated beside him on a gilded dais, Feyre witnessed a parade of suffering. While the Spring Court flaunted its restored opulence, a starving water wraith begged for leniency, explaining her lake was barren, her children dying. Tamlin, cold and unyielding, refused, demanding payment or double consequences, citing ancient traditions with a stony face. His face was granite, devoid of empathy, his gaze fixed on the letter of the law, not the spirit of compassion. This stark display of his tyrannical rule, his disinterest in his people's suffering, and his rigid adherence to tradition solidified a chilling truth for Feyre. Tamlin, the Protector, had become a prison warden, a cruel and unyielding High Lord, and the wall between them was growing higher with every passing day. This was not the High Lord she had saved. This was a stranger, cruel and unyielding, more concerned with appearances and power than the well-being of his people. She was drowning, not in water, but in silence, in luxury, in a gilded cage that grew smaller with every passing day. Feyre, the human girl who had defied a High Lord, saved Prythian, and died to be reborn as a High Fae, found herself trapped in a new kind of prison, one built of fear and control. The trauma of Under the Mountain clung to her like a shroud, and despite the endless comfort Tamlin offered, it felt less like solace and more like suffocation, a slow, deliberate strangulation of her spirit.
a chillingly effective method of control.
The cracks in Feyre's gilded cage began to show during that mundane court ritual, the tithe. When a starving water wraith offered her meager catch to Tamlin, Feyre's human empathy flared, a spark of her old self refusing to be extinguished. She challenged the ancient, harsh laws, offering her own priceless jewels to save the creature. This wasn't just kindness. It was a defiant act against Tamlin's rigid authority, a direct challenge to the very foundation of his court, a public undermining of his power. Tamlin, furious, saw it as making the court look weak, as a threat to his control, a betrayal of his carefully constructed order. He wasn't seeing her compassion. He was seeing a challenge. The argument escalated, igniting something terrifying and new within Feyre. In a flash of uncontrolled rage, she wasn't just angry, she was powerful. She felt a sudden, disorienting slide into Lucian's mind, glimpsing his thoughts, his fear, before her hand slammed onto the table, leaving scorched imprints on the expensive wood. This wasn't just residual magic. This was a gift, a fragment of power from the High Lords who resurrected her. Specifically, a piece of Rysand's potent mind magic, now stirring within her, manifesting itself in defiance. It was a clear warning that her new form harbored forces Tamlin neither understood nor desired, forces he would crush rather than cultivate, forces he would fear above all else. Tamlin, ever the protector, tried to smooth things over, to reassert his control through placation, presenting Feyre with a lavish painting kit. A thoughtful gesture, perhaps, but one that subtly pushed her back into a passive, contained role, away from the dangerous world he navigated, away from her burgeoning power. He wanted her to paint, to forget, to be the docile companion he thought he needed. But Feyre was no longer that girl. She confronted him, her voice breaking as she confessed, "I'm drowning." The words, raw and desperate, ignited Tamlin's own volatile rage. He erupted, shattering the study around them in a violent display of power, a terrifying echo of his beast form. But in that moment of terror, Feyre's own magic flared, instinctively forming an invisible shield that protected her from the storm. This was another power, another gift, manifesting itself in defiance of his control, a silent rebellion. Tamlin's immediate, tearful apology was less about remorse and more about regaining the upper hand, a desperate plea for her to remain in his carefully constructed illusion, to stay broken and dependent. Days bled into weeks. Feyre retreated, spending hours in the library, not just reading, but secretly honing her burgeoning mental and physical shields, practicing the lessons Rhysand had so brutally instilled. The silence of the manor, once a comfort, became a suffocating weight, a constant reminder of her isolation. She knew her powers were growing, even if Tamlin refused to acknowledge them. This refusal, this deliberate ignorance, was a red flag, a clear indication of his fear, his desire to keep her small and manageable. Then, Rhysand returned. His arrival was a jarring disruption, a cold dose of reality slicing through the spring court's suffocating facade. He instantly saw through Feyre's facade, his violet eyes assessing her gaunt frame and hollow gaze, recognizing the signs of her despair. He mocked Tamlin's lax wards, a pointed jab at the High Lord's failing protection and his possessive grip. Tamlin, bristling with fury, offered Rhysand anything to release Feyre from their bargain. Gold, lands, power, a desperate act that proved he saw her as a possession, a problem to be solved, rather than an equal whose well-being was his priority. Rhysand, with a knowing smirk, simply took Feyre's hand and winnowed them away to the night court. There, he didn't coddle her. He challenged her, provoked her, forcing her to confront the numb silence that had become her default. He revealed his own horrors under the mountain, a dark mirror to her own trauma. The things he had endured, the sacrifices he had made, and pushed her to fight,
to unleash the rage and grief she kept buried. He withheld food, he sealed her book, all to ignite the spark of defiance within her. And it worked. Under his relentless pressure, Feyre unleashed a new torrent of power. Icy, glittering rage that manifested as frost. And then, a scorching flame. She was a weapon, a force of nature, not a fragile flower to be protected. But the week ended, and Tamlin appeared, his face a mask of murderous fury, his eyes burning with possessive rage. He dragged Feyre back to the spring court, immediately reinstating the guards, his protection now an undeniable imprisonment. The true horror of her situation became chillingly clear when she overheard a hushed conversation between Tamlin, Lucien, and the priestess Ianthe. They spoke of her new powers, the threat she posed, the terrifying idea of other High Lords wanting to breed her for her stolen gifts, and even the cold-blooded suggestion of assassinating Rhysand to break his hold. Tamlin's response? A guttural, absolute no to any training, sealing her fate, sealing her in a gilded cage. This was a critical twist. Tamlin wasn't just protective, he was actively suppressing her, willing to risk war to keep her powerless, to keep her his. The final, crushing blow came as Tamlin prepared to leave on a supposed mission. Feyre, desperate for freedom, for purpose, begged to join him, to do something, anything, to escape the suffocating walls. But he simply turned and walked away, leaving her to slam into an invisible, impenetrable barrier. He had shielded the entire house, trapping her inside, a prisoner in her own home. Lucien, pale and helpless, confirmed it. He shielded the entire house. The realization hit Feyre with the force of a physical blow. Her protector had become her jailer. The luxurious manor, once a sanctuary, was now a gilded cage, a tomb. She stumbled, gasping for air, the walls closing in, the memories of her cell under the mountain flooding her mind. The beautiful emerald ring, Tamlin's symbol of their engagement, dripped from her finger like molten gold, the stone tumbling into the void. She was trapped, utterly alone, and the only thing left was the crushing blackness, the roar of her own despair. Her gilded cage had finally snapped shut, and her spirit screamed for escape, for retribution. She was drowning, trapped in the suffocating darkness of her own mind, the walls of Tamlin's manor pressing in like the tomb under the mountain. Every shadow was Amarantha, every whisper a death sentence. Her body thrashed, a raw, primal scream tearing through her. But it was silent, contained within the newly manifested gloom that clung to her like a shroud, a physical manifestation of her despair. Then, a sudden jolt. Strong hands, unmistakably female, gripped her, pulling her out of the suffocating void. It was Moore, Rhysand's loyal ally, who had orchestrated a lightning-fast raid on the spring court, a rescue mission executed with precision. Rhysand himself was conspicuously absent, a deliberate move. He couldn't risk a full-blown war with Tamlin just to retrieve her. Not yet. Moore, however, could do everything by the book, subduing Tamlin's guards with her own power, making the extraction legal enough to prevent immediate retaliation. This wasn't a rescue born of pure sentiment, but cold, calculated strategy, a testament to the Night Court's long game, a glimpse into the intricate web of politics and power. Moore whispered, "You're free." But Feyre felt anything but safe. She woke to a strange dawn, not in the desolate Night Court castle she had seen before, but in a sun-drenched room overlooking snow-capped mountains. Rhysand was there, his face etched with a fleeting, icy rage that quickly morphed into exhaustion, a sign of the toll the rescue had taken. He explained the political tightrope he walked. His power, the shield he'd shattered around Tamlin's manor, would have been an act of war, an open declaration that would have sparked immediate retaliation. Moore's intervention, however brutal, was precisely calibrated to avoid this, a strategic victory. Now Feyre had a choice, a true choice for the first time in months. Rhysand offered her sanctuary, a place to stay forever if you feel like it. But it came with a caveat. She had to work for him. The alternative? Return to the gilded cage of the Spring Court, to the silence and Tamlin's suffocating fear, to the death of her spirit. The decision was a bitter pill, a final severing. Tamlin, in his brokenness, had locked her away, misunderstood her so profoundly he'd tried to make her his pet. The ring was gone, the engagement shattered, and with it, the last vestiges of hope for that life. "I'm not going back," she declared, the words a death knell for her old self, a fierce vow to survive. Staying in that manner would complete the breaking Amarantha had started. As she grappled with this new reality, questions about her nascent powers surfaced. The darkness that had enveloped her, the claws she'd accidentally grown, were they from Rhys? He offered cryptic answers, suggesting she discover them herself, hinting at a journey of self-discovery she had to undertake alone. Her journey of self-discovery, it seemed, was only just beginning, a path fraught with danger and unknown potential. Unable to face the solitude of her own thoughts, the overwhelming silence of her trauma, Feyre made a desperate plea. "Take me with you." Rhysand paused, his expression hardening. If she came, there would be no going back, no speaking of what she saw or who she met, no revealing the secrets of his court. This wasn't just about her, it was about the security of his court, a secret world he guarded fiercely, a world he had painstakingly protected for centuries. She agreed, sealing her fate, ready to lie to everyone, even to those she once called friends, ready to become a weapon in a hidden war. They winnowed not into the familiar, austere night court, but into a bustling, vibrant city bathed in sunlight, a place of impossible beauty. Valeris, the city of starlight. It was a revelation, a shock to her senses. Warm wood, comfortable furniture, art, books, a lived-in home, not a fortress. She'd assumed all cities in Prythian had been ruined by Amarantha, scarred by the war. But this place was untouched, thriving, a stark contrast to the desolate world she knew. It was a stunning red herring, completely subverting everything she thought she knew about the Night Court and its High Lord, challenging her deepest prejudices. Before she could process the impossible beauty, Rhysand's infamous inner circle arrived, banging on the door, their boisterous energy filling the air. Cassian, loud and boisterous, a warrior with a rough charm. Asriel, a quiet shadow, a spy master whose scarred hands told untold stories of battles and secrets. And Amren, a sharp, ancient female, whose eyes swirled with power, a being of immense, unsettling antiquity. These were the people Rhysand had been meeting, the inner sanctum of his court, his chosen family. He offered Feyre a choice: meet them now or retreat. Overwhelmed by the sudden influx of personalities, she chose solitude, escaping upstairs as the cacophony of his family filled the air. Nuala and Cheridwen, the silent twin servants, guided her to a fire-warmed room, its windows overlooking a serene garden. The existence of Valeris, untouched by Amarantha's wrath, gnawed at her. How did it survive? She demanded of the twins.